For the first time, images of our solar system's most distant world. This was the year we finally made it to Pluto. And this is the face of the latest member of the human family tree, who's shaking up the story of our origins. Also, a record-breaking effort to travel around the globe in a solar plane, but one that ran into difficulties. We also met some of the world's most endangered animals and heard about a radical plan to put off poachers. And a bid to phase out greenhouse gas emissions. A major climate summit sought to save the planet from global warming. And the first official British astronaut, bringing to a close a momentous year in science, and one that offers so much more to come. This is the planetarium at the Royal Observatory, Greenwich. It's here where the public can come to gaze at the wonders of our cosmic neighbourhood. Thanks to decades of exploration, we've now been to every planet in our solar system. But until this year, its most distant world remained a mystery. Pluto was a place we knew barely anything about. For years, this blurry image was the best view of Pluto we had. But a new mission sought to bring it into focus. NASA's New Horizons spacecraft blasted off in 2006, heading on an epic 5 billion kilometre journey to the solar system's coldest, darkest frontiers.
No mission's ever traveled so far, or I believe so long, to reach its primary target. We're very proud to be completing the initial phase of reconnaissance of the solar system. Although we're last, the fact that we're completing this journey that was begun 50 years ago by our parents' generation is very special.
But the mission wasn't without setbacks. Months into the journey, Pluto controversially lost its planetary status and was demoted to a dwarf world. Nevertheless, as the spacecraft neared its target, excitement built as Pluto grew sharper and sharper.
Subsystems, please report your status.
But the day of the flyby saw a tense wait at Mission HQ in Maryland. The spacecraft had been out of contact for 13 hours. Finally, though, it called home.
We have a healthy spacecraft. We've recorded data of the Pluto system, and we're outbound for Pluto.
At last, the distant world was revealed. A heart shape strangely dominating the planet's surface. And the first close-up images were full of surprises too. Some areas had giant mountains as high as the Rockies made of ice, while in others frozen plains went on for miles. Strange arrays of pits and patterns littered the surface, even the possibility of volcanoes spewing ice. The largest of Pluto's 5 moons, Charon, also wowed the world.
I'll have to tell you, I'm a little biased, but I think the solar system saved the best for last.
This is just the tip of the iceberg. It will take another year to get all of the data back. Pluto is emerging as a rich and intriguing world, and one that's been worth the wait. 2015 was also a year that threw the spotlight onto us, humans. I've come to the Natural History Museum in London, where you can see all sorts of amazing objects on display, like this Neanderthal skull. It's the first one ever found, and it's one of our closest relatives, but it's not the only one. And this year, we welcome some new members to our family tree. It began with a journey deep into a cave in South Africa. Guided by torches, scientists squeeze through the narrow gaps in the rock, crawling through 200 metres of tunnel. The rest of the team looks on in amazement.
That's it.
They've found hundreds of fragments of bone, a huge hall of ancient human remains.
Everywhere that my headlamp shone, I could see that there was bone on the floor. I mean, not full bone, but fragments of material, but basically everywhere I looked, and it was an incredible thing to see.
The scientists soon realised they had something very special, a new human-like species they called Naledi that was up to 3 million years old. And this picture shows what it would have looked like, an intriguing mix of human and ape-like features.
It would have stood about 5 feet tall, a small brain about the size of a large orange, but a very human-like character to the overall plan of the skull. A hand that is almost human to the palm, but then curved extremely out at the distal ends, and then long legs that culminate in an incredibly human-like foot.
Naledi wasn't the only discovery. Another early human, Australopithecus deirymida, was unveiled in May. Unearthed in Ethiopia, bones as old as 3.5 million years were found. Our family tree is growing, and these latest finds suggest there were several different human species alive at the same time. The question now is which of these was an evolutionary dead end, and which ones gave rise to us. In March, we saw the start of a record-breaking attempt to fly around the world using only the power of the sun. The aircraft, called Solar Impulse, set off from Abu Dhabi. With a wingspan bigger than a Boeing 747, the plane was packed with thousands of solar cells. At first, the circumnavigation, carried out in multiple stages, was going to plan.
Solar Impulse has touched the ground and landed in Oman. First leg is now complete. Congratulations.
But the most difficult leg, an epic crossing of the Pacific Ocean, proved a challenge. After several false starts, the plane finally took off from Japan, the beginning of a test of endurance for its solo pilot. Strapped in a seat for 5 days and nights, he was only allowed to sleep for 20 minutes at a time. But 118 hours after taking off, the ocean crossing was complete, with a gentle touchdown in Hawaii.
I think I was privileged to be able to do this flight. It was an extraordinary experience, but above all, also it's the demonstration that this technology works. You know, this airplane flew 5 days, 5 nights. Could have flown maybe 1 week more, maybe 1 month more, and that's also what we want to show.
But after the celebrations, the world record attempt stopped here. The ocean crossing left the plane with significant damage, forcing the team to abandon the rest of their journey around the world until next year. Animals kept scientists busy too. At London Zoo, researchers tried to answer that burning question: why do penguins waddle? The birds were put to the test, lured across a high-tech track loaded with sensors.
We're hoping to find out how penguins use their legs to waddle. They're applying forces left and right as they swing their body from side to side. And what's not known about penguins is how the legs do that. How big are the sideways forces on penguin legs, and how does that compare to other waddling birds?
It's only when you get up close to penguins like Puddle and Clyde here that you see just how strangely they're put together. But it turns out that penguins didn't always waddle, and in fact their ancient ancestors moved in a much more elegant way. Oh.
You wouldn't want to be pecked by one of these. Some ancient penguins were as big as humans, and with a more horizontal posture and different leg anatomy, there was hardly a hint of waddle.
Here they come, round two.
The data from these experiments should pinpoint how and when one of nature's weirdest walks evolved, even if the penguins themselves were a bit puzzled by all the attention.
See?
The medical world in 2015 also saw a number of breakthroughs. In London, surgeons used stem cells to cure a patient of blindness, a treatment that could eventually benefit many. And in July, a vaccine against the Ebola virus was hailed a game changer. It offered 100% protection against the deadly disease. And a pioneering laser surgery to remove a brain tumour. The patient was asked to sing to make sure the surgery didn't affect a vital part of his brain.
Whatever may pass, and whatever.
This year, a radical new treatment was also given the go-ahead, one that paves the way for babies born with DNA from 3 people, but also means a range of devastating diseases can be wiped out. Lily was born in 2006.
I'll never forget the day that the doctors sat Dave and I down and said, we're really sorry, we think your daughter has a disease called mitochondrial disease, for which there's no cure and there's no treatment. She's going to die. And that's probably the harshest words that you as a parent would ever hear.
Lily passed away when she was just 8 months old. She'd been diagnosed with faulty mitochondria, the biological power packs in our cells. But the new technique could eliminate this genetic disease. In the procedure, the nucleus of a woman's fertilised egg is taken out, leaving the faulty mitochondria behind. It's then placed into an egg from another woman. This has had its nucleus removed, but has kept its healthy mitochondria. It's then implanted back into the mother. It means a child born free of mitochondrial disease, but they would now have some genetic material from a third person.
He was born 5 weeks early.
In February, Parliament backed the new treatment. It's too late for Lily's mother, but she believes this could make a huge difference to others.
This technique will allow them to go ahead and have another baby free of this disease. It would just be incredible. It is like a light at the end of the tunnel for them.
The UK is the first country to go ahead with this, and we could see the first birth as early as next year. This is the surface of our sun. These incredible close-up images were filmed in space by the Solar Dynamics Observatory. But in March, back here on the ground, we had an amazing view of our own. Across Northern Europe and in the UK, we got to witness our star putting on one of its greatest displays. A dazzling spectacle in the skies above, one that millions flocked to watch. The moon started to cast its shadow across the sun, eating away at the shining disk. In Stonehenge, there was a tantalising glimpse through the clouds. And in Leicester, children from 60 schools gathered to watch.
Red, and it's got black over it. It's very special because it doesn't happen that often.
In the Faroe Islands, day turned to night, the last glint of sunlight engulfed by the shadow.
The hairs still stand up on the back of my neck really when I see this. It reminds you that we're on a planet orbiting a sun in a galaxy of 100,000 million stars, and we can all still get excited by where we are in the universe, I think.
It will be nearly a century before the UK sees its next total eclipse. But for those left wanting more, in the autumn the moon took centre stage, turning from silver to blood red. This time with a lunar eclipse, the moon's colour was transformed. And it was the best view we'd had for 33 years. By celestial coincidence, the moon was at its closest to Earth, so it appeared a giant in the sky. In Exmoor, stargazers came to take a look.
At first I was really sceptical. I thought, I can't see any red, and then it got sort of redder and redder, and I was kind of convinced it was red. And it's really, don't want to stop looking really, just keep having another glance at it.
And the next time you can see something like this, you'll have to hang on until 2033. It was also a year for machines on a mammoth scale. After a 2-year upgrade, the Large Hadron Collider was switched back on, smashing particles at twice as much energy as before. Meanwhile, NASA's work on the James Webb Space Telescope nears completion. The giant eye in the sky will be bigger than a tennis court and launches in 2018. And these are the world's largest artificial waves. This huge new facility in the Netherlands is being used to put flood defences to the test.
Here, take my hand.
Okay.
It was the smaller but smarter tech we welcomed in for the BBC's Intelligent Machines season, even if they didn't quite perform to plan.
Oh! I'm so sorry.
From the robots helping the elderly,
Yeah.
to those machines joining the workforce, and those that look spookily like us, we explored how these technological advances are changing our lives. At this NASA robotics lab in California, scientists are working on ever more versatile robots. But could the Hollywood vision of machines outwitting humans move from fiction to fact?
We're a long way from a machine, a robot that's as intelligent as a human, because we just can't put the processing power on board a robot that's anywhere near what humans are. And on top of that, we don't have batteries that give us the endurance that a human would have.
Clearly, with robots like this, there's not much to worry about now. But scientists say we need to think ahead and make sure AI isn't a threat, but a tool.
Goodbye, Rory. Nice working with you today.
At museums like this, visitors can come and learn about the world around them and see some incredible objects up close, things they'd never normally see. But what if you had something so fragile and so precious that opening it up to the public could destroy it? That was a dilemma faced by conservationists in France, and one that required a radical solution.
A descent into the darkness to witness a prehistoric time capsule. Until recently, the last people to set foot in this place were our Paleolithic ancestors.
Sealed shut for tens of thousands of years, this place was discovered by cavers in 1994 and then closed off to the public immediately. Very few people have ever been allowed in, but it's absolutely spectacular.
On top of its natural beauty, the Chauvet Caves' most breathtaking feature is its art. Hundreds of images adorn the walls. Painted 35,000 years ago, it's some of the oldest art ever found. But opening it up to the public could destroy it.
We risk contamination. The climate would be disturbed so much that we could have alteration of the paintings. We don't want to take this risk.
Now the French authorities have found a way to both preserve and promote the cave. They've built another one. This replica reproduces the cave's most important features to scale. 3D scans were used to create a digital map. Then sculptors and artists brought the natural features to life.
It's important for the public to see the art in the environment. You have the darkness, you have also this fresh air and so on, humidity, and these elements are also an important part of the feeling, of the emotion that you can have in front of the original.
Back in the real thing, and it's full of the echoes of history. But with so few privileged enough to experience this, the replica brings a glimpse of the past to the outside world. Conservation of another kind was also a major concern, this time saving animals from extinction. The shooting of Cecil the lion brought wildlife crime to the world's attention, but the animal trade goes further. In Africa, more than 30,000 elephants are killed each year. And for rhinos, poaching is also at a record high. In Madagascar, the ploughshare tortoise is now at serious risk. These animals fetch up to £25,000 on the black market. So conservationists have taken an extreme step, engraving their shells.
Desperate times require desperate measures. There's no way around that. What we're doing now is we're defacing one of the most beautiful animals on the planet. And our whole being, we hate doing it. There's no way around it. This goes against every fibre of our bodies to do this, but it's got to be done to help save the species.
In the forests, local people are hired to watch over the tortoises, using radio transmitters to keep track of them. 100 animals bred in captivity have been released into the wild, but the numbers are still falling. These carvings could be our last chance to protect the next generation. This is a species whose future hangs by a thread. In Paris, a UN summit began with the largest ever gathering of world leaders, seeking a major new deal on climate change.
This is the moment we finally determined we would save our planet. Is the fact that our nations share a sense of urgency about this challenge and a growing realization that it is within our power to do something about it.
The aim was to cut greenhouse gas emissions that are heating up the Earth. As temperatures rise, droughts and heat waves become more likely. And warming means the melting of the ice caps, raising sea levels and threatening millions living in low-lying areas. But during the 2 long weeks of negotiations, deep divisions emerged.
We will not sign off on any agreement that represents a certain extinction of our people.
It is deeply disappointing that on one hand, developed countries are not fulfilling their obligations, and on the other hand, they are trying to shift their responsibilities to developing countries themselves.
We need a bolder text with fewer undecided options, including on key issues.
But as the summit ran into overtime, the UN appealed for a compromise.
The issues are many and complex, but we must not let the quest for perfection become the enemy of the public good.
On offer was a plan to peak greenhouse gas emissions to keep the rising global temperatures to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Finance for green technology was also offered to developing countries, with a review of progress every 5 years.
L'accord de Paris pour le climat est accepté.
Finally, it was something that 195 countries could agree on, and the deal was done. But after the celebrations, questions remain over whether this agreement can really lead to a low-carbon world. Gazing up at the Eagle Nebula, it's views like this that fueled our desire to explore. In 1961, Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space. Since then, more than 500 people have made it to the great beyond. This year, though, another joined their ranks, Tim Peake, the first official British astronaut. Tim Peake was selected by the European Space Agency 6 years ago. He's undergone a rigorous training programme, from underwater spacewalks to surviving in a cave and learning how to cope with being weightless. As the launch in Kazakhstan neared, Tim was asked what he was most looking forward to.
It really has to be the view of planet Earth, and as much as I've spoken to flown astronauts and as much advice as they've given me, I don't think anything can truly prepare you for that moment.
When the big day arrived, Tim Peake, with NASA's Tim Kopra and Russia's Yuri Malenchenko, made his way to the launch pad. One last goodbye, then it was time to go.
Auto sequence initiated.
Looking on, Tim's 2 young sons.
Has it gone?
3, 2, 1.
Finally, he was on his way.
And liftoff.
Very emotional. I have to confess it was.
Yeah.
It's been such a long time, and he's wanted it for such a long time, and finally it's here. We've done it.
And back in the UK, school children join in with the celebrations. A new generation inspired by this journey into space. Inside, the crew get to experience microgravity for the first time. But as they close in on the International Space Station, a problem. A computer malfunction means the astronauts have to guide the capsule in themselves.
And there we can see Tim Peake from the European Space.
At last, a warm welcome for Tim in his new home.
It was a beautiful launch, and we got launched straight into night and got on with the work. But that first sunrise was absolutely spectacular, and we also got the benefit of a moonrise on the first orbit as well, which is beautiful to see.
Tim Peake now begins his 6-month adventure in space. A fitting end to a remarkable year in science.